Hello everyone, welcome to an analysis of dance where we discuss the movements and debuts of the Billboard dance charts in immaculate detail with in-depth reviews of each debut each week. So this was a bit of a weird week for me. I mean, obviously with the introduction of the warm global dance radio charts last week, it was likely going to lead to more interesting discussion here, especially considering that it actually has movements and is showing some actual genuine rotation, which is pretty exciting. And man, that's important to note because outside of hot dance and dance pop having two pretty big debuts, we didn't really get much else of note. It was really the only thing that was interesting this week. And thank God too, because the quality was a little bit too inconsistent for my liking, honestly leaning closer towards this week being pretty average, not particularly interesting. But anyways, starting off with our hot dance charts where Dracula by Tame Impala is just getting this sort of unprecedented rebound on streaming thanks to that remix, and quite frankly I'm shocked that it's actually doing this well. It's comfortably one of the biggest dance songs in the world right now, and considering that Tame Impala has never made a song like this as big as this song has gotten, I'm kind of impressed by it, to be honest with you. I'm actually pretty happy of how well it's doing right now. I mean, it's not like there's much competition where No Broke Boys by Disco Lines and Tinashe at #2 might have good streaming, but radio is done with it. It long peaked ages ago. Quite frankly, it needs something to knock it down at this point. It's getting a little bit tiring. Although, thankfully, that doesn't look like it's going to be No Batty Dale by Sakai and Slaughter at #3, where it looks like the streaming is starting to stall out on this one. And considering that it's not remotely strong enough to even reach bubbling under territory, I can really hope that this goes away fast. It's overstayed its welcome way too much. And speaking of things that have overstayed their welcome, I Run by Haven featuring Caitlin Arrogant at #4. Yeah, you can tell that I've really soured on this one recently. Everything around Haven and this rollout has been absolutely terrible. And even if the song itself is fine, I just have no real interest in supporting it anymore at this point, even with all the remix boosts that do admittedly make it more interesting in some cases. Besides, why throw support behind that when you can throw support at the sort of massive and unprecedented debut in the top 5 that I don't think anyone saw coming at all? Debuting at #5, Talk to You by Another featuring Ultra 54? Yes, seriously, this actually happened. And it's really getting pushed across the board here. Streaming is massive for this one, to the point where it's debuting on charts across the world at this rate, and considering that it's showing no signs of actually slowing down, this could be a legitimately huge hit going into summer. It's certainly got the sound and approach to it, and when we get to the song later on, yeah, you'll realize why I'm extremely happy about this, and quite frankly, Another has been really deserving of this for a long time now. Almost kind of makes the rest of the top 10 redundant at this point, especially when you have Let the World Burn by Chris Gray, Rebel and Cried at #6, where it looks like this is finally on its way out properly on streaming, and considering that it's not good at all, I'm not about to complain about it leaving. And it's also quite exciting because that opens up even more room for Just the Way You Are by Milky and Mulgrave, which is surging really well at #7. It's got great streaming and radio behind it. This could also be a thing. That would be really awesome to see. And thanks to both that song's gains and also Talk to You's debut in the top 5, this really knocked down a few songs that have really overstayed their welcome. Starting with Turn the Lights Off by Kato featuring John at #8. Really, I'm just shocked that this is still here. I guess the sales and streaming are decent enough, especially when it's still being out All the Things She Said by Harrison at #9, where it looks like this is actually finally going away. I didn't expect it would be this quickly, but I'm not about to complain. The song still blows. But on the note of surprises, Save My Love by Kygo, Khalid and Griffin actually managed to hold in the top 10 for another week at #10, and yes, it is losing on streaming and didn't really have much in the way of airplay or sales, but I guess it's actually holding pretty decently. Kind of surprised by that. I thought this would have flopped out really quickly, but where things actually showed some genuinely surprising quality came in our falls and fall-offs, where every song that left this week absolutely blowed, and quite frankly, they're all great to see leave at this point. I mean, you had your long-running songs that already made their year-end list spot ages ago, like Montegem Zornada by Mozzie, DJ Samir and DJ Harvey 26, and Montegem Rugada by Safe House Cape and Jandro. Those are both indicative of the scene finally starting to leave. I really hope they're gone for good this time. And alongside them, we lost Cry For Me by Iron Mouse and Bubby. Yeah, not complaining at all there. And really our falls, either they're John Summits or songs exiting naturally. Can't really complain too much in either case at this point. For the former case, Shadows with Lavinia fell down to 25, and With Me with Julia Wolf just plummeted out of the top 10 down to 13. Maybe a sign that releasing mediocre singles is not exactly a way to keep songs around, and and it's a shame too because Shadows deserve better than this. And in the latter case, well, there's only one, I Want Things to Be Beautiful by Debbie McCallion at 21. A song that will easily make the year-end list for 2026, and quite frankly, I am amazed that it actually stuck around as long as it did, and did as well as it did. I'm not complaining, let's hope there's more coming from her. Oh, and since we had no notable jumps this week, that only left a comeback for Think About Us by Sonny, Fodera, AAoD, and Poppy Bascombe at 22. Pretty good, not going to complain. And that takes us nicely to our two debuts, where we have to unfortunately start with number 18, Save Me Tonight by Jennifer Lopez and David Guetta.
Heavy tonight, don't know where your touch could take me, but it feels like maybe you could say heavy tonight.
I mean, what do you really want me to say about this? It's about as interesting as both artists credited actually suggest here, meaning it's not at all. I mean, I will admit that David Guetta has been getting at least a little bit better over the last couple of years. I mean, he's proved with songs like Crazy and A Better World that he's actually able to deliver some really solid production with some catchy hooks. I get why he's still sticking around even if his material is not charted as much recently, but working with Jennifer Lopez, who hasn't been remotely good for at least a decade, possibly pushing 2, that's not a good way to revive your career at all. And yeah, the lack of a high debut for this one is really revealing. I can absolutely get why people were not on board with this, especially when the song is not good at all. Bland house beat with synths that remind me a lot of She's Homeless by Chrystal Waters, a much better song that I'd rather be listening to, where even with Chrystal Waters not delivering one of her better vocal performances, I'd still absolutely take her over Jennifer Lopez, who sounds completely checked out here and has become increasingly anonymous, which for someone who used to dominate the Latin pop scene back in the day, that's really disappointing. And when you add on the generic party content and the fact that this production sounds increasingly dated, this sounds like a draft from 2013 that has no reason being released now, and at this point it just sounds sad and out of touch. Really the story of a lot of pop collaborations with David Guetta nowadays. I mean, it's not even interestingly bad, it's just bland and boring and not remotely good, and quite frankly it's proof that both of these artists have not charted in a long time for good reason. Skip this. Number 5, Talk to You by Another featuring Ultra 54. Honestly, kind of surprised that this didn't happen earlier. Quite frankly, Another have been really deserving of this for a while now. I mean, I was already on board the hype train with them back in 2023 when Relax My Eyes charted. That song is still one of my favorite hits of 2023. And their excellent album featuring the follow-up charting song How You Feel, it really was worth checking out. It's a shame it didn't blow up as much as I expected. I mean, I own that album on vinyl. It is really good. So that begs the question, why such a long gap between charting songs? I mean, it's not like the duo has been quiet or anything. They've been releasing music that's been doing decently well. Some of them have charted on Global Dance, which is really interesting. It's a real sign that they are getting a lot more attention in Europe nowadays. But the main reason is probably just due to the fact that their material really does hit specifically in a few seasons and not really anywhere else. And when there's a lot of other acts that were doing that particular sound around that time, it didn't surprise me that they took a while to actually chart again. But I don't know, I think between the nostalgia for this particular sound, especially with 2016 revivalism coming along with songs like Lush Life getting popularity, as well as the really consistently successful run of more chill-leaning tracks, especially from acts like, say, Oscar Medkay, it doesn't really surprise me that it translated over to these guys getting their biggest charting song now instead of Relax My Eyes. That feels weird. And the public clearly want this too. The streaming with this is absolutely massive, and at the rate it's going, it's going to only continue to go up, and I think we're all better off for it because this is excellent. Seriously, the blend of those much more relaxing drums against a legitimate bass line and some of the warmest sounding guitars that I've heard in mainstream EDM in a long time, it all comes together for this absolutely gorgeous atmosphere that really does play into summer vibes perfectly. I can understand why this has an audience going into that that season moving forward, and quite frankly, I think we're all better off for it. It's the sort of track that you can just blast to really soundtrack some gorgeous beach parties. I wouldn't even be surprised if Ibiza and the circuit there actually picks this up. It's got every reason to be massive there. And to top it off, you've got a really nice low-key hook that's not only really well mixed and doesn't sound intrusive or annoying at all despite how repetitive it is, it's proof that once again these guys can absolutely nail that sort of hook and are seriously underrated in that field. They have many songs that could have easily fit this same mold, and with this being the big one, I think we're all in a great space for it. I mean, I don't know how long this will last once we move into, say, autumn or winter. It doesn't really have the sound that would fit in those seasons, but for now, I'm gonna absolutely cherish this being a massive hit. Quite frankly, I hope it goes up fast. This is fantastic. And moving on to dance pop, not really a ton to note outside of the debuts here, but there were some things that did happen. For one, really I'm surprised that Stateside by Pink Pantheress and Zara Larsson actually managed to hold a #1, where you think that Harry Styles' album bomb would push Aperture up, but it looks like it got stranded just barely. I mean, Stateside is the better song, I'm not exactly upset about that. Hell, it's also interesting to note that Pink Pantheress' other songs are actually sticking around decently well, yes, even with Tonight falling down to 15. Doesn't surprise me given the virality was only going to last so long, and considering that Girl Like Me is actually holding steady above it, I think it's going to end up being the biggest song. Not exactly happy that Tonight's underperforming, but at least it's still here. But that takes us to our two debuts, where we don't start with Harry Styles, but rather number 11, New Religion by Bebe Rexha and Faithless.
Me a melody and I was hypnotized with every note. It pulled me close until I kissed the sky. I found my purpose in the church is filled with neon.
Man, it would only be a matter of time before Bebe Rexha would actually see her major comeback, and I'm honestly a lot more surprised of how supportive I've been of it recently. I mean, I remember her earlier dance-leaning material that showed a lot of promise, and considering that her career has been the definition of mismanaged, where a lot of her albums really underperformed after I'm Good Blue, and quite frankly showed that she was not exactly going to bounce back anytime soon, I was all in favor of her going independent, especially when it could potentially lead to a revival of that old dance approach that she went for, as she actually showed some interest in that. And especially considering the collaborators that she's worked with recently, it's been a really promising sign that she might do something like that on her own material. A little more worried was the fact that her big comeback single that actually charted here managed to do so by sampling Insomnia by Faithless quite blatantly. Geez, doesn't look like the I'm Good Blue formula has actually gone away on her just yet. And that's kind of ironic because I actually like this a lot more. It's really good. I mean, yes, the sample is extremely on the nose and really obvious. Quite frankly, it dominates way more of the instrumental than I'd personally prefer. But when you add on those extra tech house kicks, it actually gives the original drops on that song a lot more energy. And especially when the original iconic melody is replicated both in the synths and also Bebe Rexha's own vocals, it keeps the catchiness of the original intact. I get why people are on board with this one more. Credit to Bebe Rexha, she actually delivers a much more low-key and restrained hook than I expected here, where she doesn't go into her screechy upper register and instead sticks to a really solid mid-range. And when she actually sounds this invested and is able to flow over this production really well, where it sounds quite natural to her, honestly, it's a much bigger improvement than I expected from someone who was on I'm Good Blue. I'm really impressed. I mean, it's not exactly something that really stands out in the grander scheme of the genre. It's really relying on a classic song to get anywhere, but when the production sounds this good on top of the original and Bebe Rexha sounds like she actually cares, you know what, I'll give credit. This is actually pretty solid. It's not a bad song at all. Good stuff, I guess. Number 3, Are You Listening Yet by Harry Styles. Whereas with this, I was a lot more worried, considering that I really wish I didn't have the level of dread that I felt going into this album. I mean, I really like Aperture to this day. It's a great track, and it really shows that Harry Styles actually has the risk-taking abilities to actually push this to radio, despite the fact that it's really out of his usual comfort zone. I've got to give him credit for that. It's something that I can't really say about what I've heard from the rest of the album so far. I mean, the mixed critical reception and the sound of the album outside of Aperture not really being something that I'm fully into. It didn't give me much hope for any sort of new singles that would chart here, so I guess now's really the chance to prove whether I was wrong about that theory, considering that this is a semi-decently performing album cut that actually was allowed to chart on Dance Pop, and with this, okay, it's fine, I don't mind it, but again, it does have a lot of the issues I was worried about going into this album. Look, I like the driving percussion style. It's got a lot more focus on the snares for a lot more impact, and it does actually sound pretty heavy. I do like how it sounds here. And the hook's not bad too, where Harry Styles faces his inner self-thoughts about a lot of his bad habits and breaking out of them, to the point where he's actually showing some genuine self-awareness and is actually trying to get out of it, which for someone who has been stuck in fame for a while and is actually pushing himself to new territory with this album, it does feel very meta in a way, but man, those verses just absolutely kill it for me, where Harry Styles goes into more of a speak-sing sort of approach with his vocals, and not only do they sound increasingly flat and uninterested, they also do not feel like they fit on this instrumentation at all. With a groove this tight, you really need someone who actually has more confidence and more presence than Harry Styles shows on this song, and they really just drag down an otherwise good track into merely just being okay for me. I mean, it's not the worst thing I've heard from the album by any stretch, but it's also not exactly something that interests me enough to check out more. It's not particularly interesting, nor all that good. I mean, it at least leads to dance streaming having at least something happen here, even if it's not exactly interesting nor all that notable, where again, Stateside by Pink Pantheress and Zara Larsson managed to actually beat all the Harry Styles songs at #1. It's looking really nice there. It's nearly in the top 5. We can make it happen. But outside of that, really just Revolving Door by Tay McRae continuing down to 15. I'm surprised that this is still here at all. And in our debuts, Are You Listening Yet by Harry Styles at #3, alongside Aperture at #2. Yeah, not exactly interesting there. And as for dance sales, well, okay, I'm surprised that Ring My Bell by Anita Ward actually managed to hold a #1. I guess the virality from those advertisements is still actually making it stick around. We're all better off for it. But really outside of that, all we've got now falls is MacArthur Park by Donna Summer down to 12. Again, the virality was not going to last. And Lush Life by Zara Larsson at #8. Yeah, that's not exactly a good sign. And in our comebacks, it's also not interesting, as we've got Your New Morning Alarm by Mark Rebelay at 14, and that awful Cyril remix of The Sound of Silence covered by Disturbed at 15. Can we let go of that song, please? But at least in this case, we saw 3 debuts, all songs that I've already covered, and are not Harry Styles. They're the other debuts too, which is quite interesting. Talk to You by Another featuring Ultra 54 at #10, Save Me Tonight by Jennifer Lopez and David Guetta at #3, and New Religion by Bebe Rexha and Faithless at #2. At least a good one's actually winning out. This is interesting. And finally, Warm Global Dance Airplay, where at least some stuff actually happened this week, considering it's actually got some decent movements, and it looks like the rotation's actually pretty interesting. That's good. So at #1 is once again Release the Pressure by Calvin Harris and Kasabian. It's not exactly surprising considering the new versions that will likely get some airplay alongside the original, and it has a big 100+ point lead on spins, so yeah, it got there by a landslide. But on the other hand, you've got Rain by Fisher at #2. Quite frankly, I'm amazed that it actually managed to get this high, but considering it's one of his better performing songs in the last couple of years, it shouldn't be that surprising, and it is welcome. Although I say that, the streaming traffic for it doesn't really matter in certain cases, like with Lost by Vintage Culture and Gaps at #3, where I guess that it got a bit of traffic on the back of remixing a much bigger nostalgic song that people actually like, and turning it into a mediocre and not particularly interesting remix. I'm not exactly happy it's this high. But man, I'd still take it over the absolute garbage that is Jamaican Bam Bam by Hugo and Salto at #4, where I just hope that this whole trend of Hugo getting at least something to cross over just dies off in record time. I've heard some things about him as a person too. Let's just say all my respect for him has completely gone out the window, whatever little I had left. But really, one of the reasons that both of these jumped this much was Neck by Mal P falling to #5. A little bit early on the falls on spins, but considering how fast they rotated out Tesla, it doesn't surprise me. It had a decent run if anything. Thankfully though, that means that Just the Way You Are by Milky and Morgrab can also jump up here at #6, where it looks like this is gaining considerable spins at a pretty steady rate. Awesome, really good to see. Especially helped by the fact that other songs were losing hard, like Think About Us by Sonny, Fodera, AAoD and Poppy Basscomb at number 7. Quite frankly, I'm amazed this hit number 1 at all, but it is a really good song, I'm not going to complain. Certainly more preferable than garbage like Loco Loco by Gordo and Renier Zonneveld at number 8, where it looks like this pile of garbage is actually getting this sort of traffic instead of some actual good non-English dance songs, because seriously, between this and Jamaican Bam Bam, it's looking pretty rough there at the moment, especially when it's beating out actual good songs like Shadows by John Summit and Lavinia at number 9. Again, I'm kind of surprised this one's actually doing this well, considering you think it'd be a lot more US-centric given John Summit's audience, but it looks like Lavinia's momentum is actually able to let this chart in Europe too. Again, it's one of the few good things about this rollout so far, I can't complain. And ending out, well, another welcome top 10 entry for I Think I'm Addicted by Oscar Medkay and Haley Joel at number 10. Quite frankly, I really hope this continues to go up, and even if it has charted a lot longer than I expected and will probably not really last that long in the top 10, I'm just happy that it's here. Any excuse to praise this song to hell and back is definitely welcome. Anyways, outside of that, not really a lot of fall-offs to truly note here, outside of the Hyperton and David Guetta remix of Where Is My Husband by Ray not only falling off the top 40, but completely out of the top 100 from number 13 last week. That's really rough. But our falls are more interesting because in some cases they indicate a stalling out that honestly does feel a little bit surprising in some cases and is a little bit too early for my liking. I mean, the big one for me is Fade by Alesso and Pendulum to 17. Real shame that one didn't catch on more, but I really hope it does rebound. But further down, you've got some cases replicating the US dance airplay charts response to them, like say Vision Blurred by Cascade Sid and Annabelle England at 26, and Out of My Body by Anima featuring EJ at 31. Again, both of these are on their way out on the main media-based dance airplay chart. I'm not too surprised they're not doing well here either. And then you've got some weird outliers like Destiny by Leighton Giordani and Camden Cox at 27, or Cook by Sophie Tucker and J Balvin at 37. Free You've Got to Live by Hugo and Alternate thankfully collapsing down to 39, and Into My Life by Cam Stockman featuring Joyce Sims at 14. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that's still there, but different conversation. And really, since there's no comebacks, I mean, we're in the earlier stages of this chart, it's not surprising. That only leaves 3 jumps, and all of them are house related, with 2 of them being tech house and not surprising in the slightest. Positive by Jamback at 34, Crazy by Matsasari and Jack Back featuring Amira Eldin at 29, and Weirdly Beautiful Places by Tiesto and Brianna Grace only going up to 18. I thought this would be an easy surge, and it's not really pushing as much as it should right now. Let's see how it goes moving forward. And on that note, one thing I forgot to mention last week is that thanks to Billboard actually tracking the stuff outside of the top 40 that's not showing on their main charts, that led to cases where certain songs that would be considered debuts in any other case are being labeled as jumps instead. And honestly, it's not the worst thing that they could have done, especially when it actually adds on to the artist history pages under certain artists that actually have those particular pages available. And even if I have my issues on the fact that they're following Warm's formatting for certain cases where songs are not credited to the right artist or not showing on artist histories at all, the main thing for me is that in specific cases, songs that are considered jumps on this chart are actually debuts in the top 40 for the first time ever. And yeah, some of the debuts were considered that as well. I'll get to some of those later on, but for now we actually have 2 debuts that I've already covered, and one of them falls into this category, being Save My Love by Kyo, Khalid and Griffin at 23. Not surprising at all. And there's also the new debut that's actually considered one, Talk to You by Another featuring Ultra 54, already debuting at 22, which is really impressive. But of course, in classic Billboard fashion and following under Warm's formatting, which has just consistently been frustrating to look at, they labeled this as Let Me Talk to You by Clovis, an artist who's known for bootleg uploads and has no version of this particular track on Spotify or any stream platform at all. They really should be looking into this. It looks a bit silly and it's not exactly a good sign of their management of this chart moving forward. But anyways, that takes us to 4 debuts that I've not covered, starting off with some particularly welcome surprises, like number 35, I Can't Wait by Bob Sinclar and Kiesza. Okay, so one factor that that really is notable with this chart is just how much it really favors older acts that have been around for decades now, and in Bob Sinclar's case, considering he's been around since the early 2000s, it doesn't really surprise me that he's actually managing to cross over with a new collaboration with Kiesza of all people, who I haven't thought about since 2023. And considering how much I really like a lot of Bob Sinclar's classic hits, and his newest material has actually been really solid, especially the new disco vein, and there's been a lot of really good stuff there, I was at least interested if this would turn out good, and it's just a shame in this case that it's only decent for me. I mean, it's a pretty solid summer house cut with a nice breezy atmosphere and some smoother percussion that honestly and really unfortunately in this case reminds me of Stonebridge, an act who I'd absolutely prefer nowadays over these two, considering he's keeping a really consistent production quality that's been around since Put 'Em High. And part of the problem here unfortunately is Kiesza, who doesn't really have the sort of vocal presence or personality that she once did, and is buried so far in the back of the mix where it's really hard to distinguish her personality at all. And when the track doesn't really have much in the way of dynamics where the hook and verses are really hard to tell apart outside of a really annoying vocal chop, honestly, it's fine. I can absolutely understand the appeal, and the production's still decent for what it is, but considering the high standards I hold both of these two, I wish this was a little bit more interesting. Just gonna say that. Number 33, Addicted to Bass by Puretone.
Wow, wow. I'm totally addicted to bass. Wow, wow.
And speaking of older acts, well, in this case it's particularly obvious why this song from 25 years ago is actually charting now, because in all of his frustratingly disappointing presence the last year, Dom Dolla made a remix of this song that actually got to charts on dance radio. So the original song came out in 2001 by an underground Australian DJ, pretty much became his only song that had any sort of notoriety, to the point where all of his subsequent singles absolutely underperformed, and he's been releasing sporadically since then with no new material in sight for the last 2 years. And sadly, I kind of get why his momentum didn't really go anywhere, because I'm not really a fan of the original much at all. The breakbeat production actually had some genuine potential with a solid groove, but when you factor in the horrible mixing where it sounds muddy and increasingly muffled, alongside some really annoying female vocals that have next to nothing that I really enjoy in this particular sound at all, as they get pitchy and really off-key in some spots to the point where it gets particularly distracting, all against some really oddly panned synths that don't sound remotely nice on the ears at all. It's an example of this early 2000s dance trend that has aged like milk, and quite frankly it makes complete sense why this guy went nowhere. The production quality was just not good enough to excuse this. So given that low bar, I was expecting that at least the Dom Dolla remix would at least improve on some things, considering he's a better producer when he actually tries. And in the grand tradition of one of the biggest fall-offs I've seen in quality in the last year, this somehow manages to actually be worse. I just don't get the mentality of making this sort of tech house song or remix in 2026, where there's next to no melody outside of the original sampled vocals, which somehow sound even worse, being muffled and completely pitch shifted to an awful register. And while the bass line and percussion is at least okay for what it is, the lack of any melody just makes this sound completely dime a dozen within tech house. There's nothing here that's remotely interesting nor special, and when the mixing somehow is just as muddy as the original, yeah, this remix is not remotely good. Maybe a sign that the lack of traffic for the newer material after Dreaming is not exactly a fluke when the material is this consistently awful. And yeah, with this being a bad remix of an already bad song, yeah, somehow this ends up being worse than I expected. Both versions of this suck, you can skip both of them. Number 32, You by Armand van Helden, Mark Knight and D. Ramirez. But thank God after that turd, we can actually turn to a bunch of established names that I actually genuinely like. Armand van Helden especially has been the sort of name that I've been really impressed by, especially recently, and having already been a big fan of his classic singles like My, I Want Your Soul, and also enjoying the forward-thinking work he's done under Duck Sauce, I was at least interested, especially when the collaborators are Mark Knight, who's been a mainstay of Tool Room Records for a while now and has been consistently delivering really good house music, and D. Ramirez, who is most most known nowadays for that big remix of Yeah Yeah by Body Socks and Luciana, which has been absolutely remixed to death and has still managed to hold the test of time, surprisingly. I was expecting a really solid funk house track, especially considering it's actually being released on Toolroom, and yeah, this is genuinely great. Continuing in Armand van Helden's classic funky house sound, all three veterans just absolutely nail that sort of club-ready dance groove with a really legitimately epic bass line against some really smooth percussion and female vocal samples that deliver a really great hook and have a lot of soul to them. It's the sort of classic clubhouse leading tracks that you would expect to chart on the UK club charts. Honestly, kind of surprising that they actually managed to make the mainstream dance radio space at all. But when the production and mixing is this consistently good and it's also ridiculously catchy, yeah, I get why this is blowing up. It's a great song, proof of why all three of these names are actually sticking around. Definitely recommended. And finally, number 14, My Loving by Sonny, Fodera and Chrystal. Okay, so after my slight concerns last week around the acts on some days not exactly expanding their collaborators outside of the really familiar, I find it deeply ironic that the week after, Sonny Fodera charts a song with Chrystal in the top 15. Guess that MK jumping on the Chrystal bandwagon first by getting her onto Dior was enough of a reason for other artists to actually care. Shame again that this one's not particularly interesting, although it is fine, I guess. The main problem is really Chrystal, who unfortunately continues to prove that the days was a fluke for her, considering her vocals are not exactly refined or sounding all that good here whatsoever. That wavering vocal thing that she does at the end of certain lines gets annoying in record time, and when her vocals are already shaky enough on the verses and are weirdly mixed behind the admittedly solid percussion and bass line, it proved to me why her moment went really quickly and why she's not exactly getting much momentum outside of Dior on the days nowadays. It's really telling. Shame too, because on production alone with a really solid groove behind everything, I was at least really close to calling this good, but the vocals drag it down to being decent. Again, another case of one that I wish I liked more. And that was this week. Bit of a weak and uninteresting one, but at least the best and worst fall out really quickly. For the worst, I mean, both versions of Addicted to Bass by Puretone would absolutely get there. They're both not good at all, and the remix especially drags this one down for me. It's really bad. But Dishonourable runner-up is close with Save Me Tonight by Jennifer Lopez and David Guetta, although I hold that one to much lower expectations nowadays, so it didn't really disappoint me in the same way. But the best, also pretty easy with Talk to You by Another featuring Ultra 54. It's pretty obviously the best here, with honourable runner-up going to You by Armand van Helden, Mark Knight and D. Ramirez. Nice to see all these three here, and the song is great to boot. Next week, not really a lot I could really expect to chart here outside of maybe Martin Garrix and that new John Summit song that I've hinted at being particularly bad. Not exactly excited for it. But yeah, that's all for this episode of an analysis of dance. See you next time.